Hello, Courtney. Hello, Gabriel. Thanks, Patrick, for the introduction. A pleasure to be here. So as Patrick said, we're here to discuss about what is better for companies, for startups to grow fast, either growing regionally or growing globally, right? So I would like just to kick off this discussion, Courtney and Gabriel, if you can please give us your view on that, your quick first impression on that.
Sure. Hi. Great to join the panel. A little bit about kind of my perspective on the panel, I think is important. I grew up in California and moved down to Latin America in 2014, helped to scale Cabify across the region, and then left Cabify to start Runa, which is automating payroll for Latin America. So we particularly play in the localization space. We do not compete with Silicon Valley companies that build payroll software because their payroll softwares don't work for the region. So I'm very passionate about the local play, the importance of localization, and obviously it very much relates to the company that we're building today.
Super. Thank you, Courtney.
Hi, Gabriel. I'm probably going to play on the other side. I'm the CEO founder of Rocket Chat, which is a platform, a communication platform for teams that work distributed. It's our global demand. It's a tool that then works on any region and for companies that are multi-region. So for us, starting as a global company made a big difference. And I think your question, if there's a better way, I think there is the right way for each company, right? You have to make a conscious decision, understand the limitation, and understand if the hyper localization that you can have, it's a competitive advantage. And in some ways, it can be for some companies, and for other startups, can be just a delay, right? So I think we can help here to try to help founders to figure it out.
Very good. And a question for both of you guys. If you have to choose 3-4 criteria to decide this is the correct approach or the correct decision, like what will be the 3-4 decisions to decide what do I do?
Interesting. Well, I can try and take a shot. I think first would be market, like what size market are you going after, right? I don't think any of us want to go after a very small market and try and get 50% of a small market, right? I think that's just not saying it can't happen. There are companies that I'm sure have done it, but I would much more sign up for the big market and getting a very, very small percentage. So just taking an example of Runa, building an automated payroll software, Latin America has 20 million SMBs. Mexico, which is our first market, just has 4. So even if we get less than 1% of Mexico, we build $1 billion company. That's attractive. That's something that someone would want to bet on, right? The second is, okay, you have a big market opportunity. How many competitors are you up against, right? Who are you competing against and why are you going to win versus them? And maybe you don't need to be the winner because the market is so big, but you can stand up against them and win your piece of the market to build your unicorn. And I think that's also really interesting and what makes an opportunity, more or less attractive. In the case of Cabify, it was very hard to go up against Uber. They were very well funded, great piece of technology, really smart people working on it. It was definitely a challenge. At Runa, we don't go up against Silicon Valley players. We go up against old payroll software, 30-year-old technology, not the people you usually see around the startup table. So we can really innovate and sort of run circles around those competitors. So I think market and competition are important. And then I would say the third is also kind of how complex is the product you need to build and how much investment will it take, right? We unfortunately are in a market where you have to build a big piece of software before you really start to kind of take significant market share. Why is that with payroll? Just looking at Mexico as an example, there's 10 types of workers in 32 states, right? So without knowing much about payroll, you immediately have to have 320 different versions of calculations, right? And it's actually a lot more than that. So that's not, and every company can have a different one and a different variable on that one. So it's not simple software to build. It's also not rocket science. We're not the first people to build payroll software, but it does take a thoughtful approach and it takes time. We couldn't have all the types of workers, all the states day one that we have today. and where Runa will be in 5 years will also be a lot stronger position in terms of functionality and flexibility that will ultimately help us win customers, right? So I think, the reason why that's important is that ultimately, if it's a more complex product to build, that either takes time or money or a combination of the both, right? And so you have to look at it as well as an entrepreneur. What are your resources available to be able to build your product? And if you're not someone who can, if you need to build a huge piece of software and you can't go raise the money that you need to be able to do that, or have 50 buddies that are engineers that want to hop on and code for free, then you should probably change kind of the product that you're building, or what you're doing, or at least have a deep reflection on it, because you can't win without the product, right? In the market, at least for us, like if we don't have the feature, doesn't matter how pretty Runa is, we're not going to win the customer because we can't process their payroll.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Thank you. Great elements. Courtney. Gabriel, what is your point of view on that?
Yeah, I think those are great elements, but maybe add if there is any opportunity for a network effect. If you have a marketplace, right? Like marketplace, usually if you have a delivery component or a physical component, like a food delivery, you need to get the restaurants, and you need to get the people know that you have the restaurants in their area. So it's a much harder to get a global footprint unless you're very, very well funded, right? And even though you're gonna do in phases. So I think when there is a physical component and this network effect is usually better if you focus on a region, and then you get the network effect going, because you need to cross a threshold to get that momentum, and it would be easier if you target. And also legislation, like legal requirements, it would be very hard to open a global bank, right? You have to get licenses and agreements, and there's a lot of things that you have to do on the legal side that might make you more sense for you to go country by country and adapting and getting the licenses. So I think, like adding to what Courtney already says, maybe those two, the network effect and the legal requirements, can be constraints. And then on the other side, if you're building a product which is not simple, I say, but it's more of a generic, that it's the same requirement worldwide, like in the case of Rocket Chat, communication, video conferencing, chat, all those things are almost like universal, then it's easier for you to do a global offering.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Super, Gabriel. Very interesting. You've been moving your company globally. Can you share some of the mistakes or things you would do differently if you have to do it now?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that I would have done differently was to register the trademarks and brand globally from the very beginning. I think it took some time to do it. We didn't realize how much awareness we already get in some countries. So it triggers some patent trolls and brand trolls to start trying to register before us. So that was definitely a mistake. That I would do. If you should do it very sooner rather than later.
Very good. In terms of expanding the company, even though outside your region or even within your region, sometimes many startups and companies they wonder if they need a partner, a reseller, a distributor, right? What is your point of view, Courtney and Gabriel, on this point?
From our sense, it was both also a mix. We were one of those started to go global on day one, right? Our first employees were already hiring them to work from home, distributed in 30 countries. And so we had a little bit of a feeling of a closer relationship with a customer in Germany. There was some of the employees in Germany, they could talk with them in German and give them a sense of being closer. But definitely when you start to get larger customers, for instance, in Japan, they asked for a local partner, so they would feel more confident in going to business with us. They needed someone that would speak Japanese, that could visit their office. And we're talking about customers like 30, 60,000 users. They start demanding this kind of care. So it was easy for us to sell globally without having partners on the small and medium enterprise. But when it started to reach the larger enterprises, they would usually ask for a local partner to feel more comfortable with closing the deal.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah, I think the other part of selling is just that, sales are different in different countries, right? And so you really have to kind of tweak your model for that. I think just speaking about localization for Latin America, the first version of Runa had a self-onboarding and kind of put your payment in and go. No one wanted to use it because I think payroll is a very complex product. And so you don't want to put everything in and have them run payroll wrong, nor do they want that. And then the other side is there's a lot of distrust of just putting your credit card in something without knowing the people behind the product. I think that's a very Latin point of view. Americans prefer, they don't trust people, right? They're like, if there's a person involved, I don't want to talk to them. They're probably selling me something that's not real. I want to read the website, interact with the technology and then decide for myself. So it's a very different sales process in Latin America. And I think what we ended up having to do is we had to build out kind of a person involved in showing you a demo versus just throwing you into a demo. And then after that, kind of a natural sales process of multiple touches until we get you to a close. And then a 30-day kind of activation cycle where we work with you back and forth on looking at a lot of documents and inputting them in the system, and finally kind of putting you into the software, doing a test payroll with you, and then letting you go on your way. And I think that's now that we have that set up, we've gone back and say, okay, what can we automate on the back end? And so building, again, that automated process, but from a much more, integrated, people integrated process. And I do think we think a percentage of the market can be just direct and go and sign up and move. And another part will probably still want to have that human interaction. That's just one example. Another example is the distributor network in Latin America. It's another kind of network that exists in America, but again, not many people use it, because why am I going to go to a distributor that sells me 15 different things when I can just go online and Google, what's the best email software, what's the best video conference software, what's the best ERP for my company? I think, again, in Latin America, because there's kind of a lack of knowledge on business systems, they like to go to a business systems expert. They can talk about all the different ones there are, how they all connect. And so that trust is given. They may buy one system from the distributor at a time and then go back to them and ask them for more advice as they grow. The distributor network is responsible for selling like 95% of Microsoft, Google in Latin America. Like, these are very active networks. And the old payroll softwares that we compete against are almost 100% sold through distributors. So when you talk about that in the States, they're like, what? This is like the 1980s. Distributors were before the internet. And so you say, yes, but it's a very different situation in Latin America, and it's a very active, real channel. And then, of course, there's other channels that sort of that we could talk about. But I think those are some just quick examples of how you really have to tune kind of the sales piece for the environment that you're operating in.
Very good. You touched a very interesting point. You spoke about people, Courtney. What about talent in Latin America? How difficult it is? Because there is always, we listen, there is a war for talent, right? So how do you handle that, especially in different countries? And also in terms of culture, how do you keep one single culture, one single DNA in all the company?
Yeah, when you were talking about sort of what are the challenges of localization, and the first one I wrote on my list was people hiring. I think you have to first, so one, talent wars exist everywhere. After you've worked in like Palo Alto and tried to like do a little nothing startup next to those big giants and Y Combinator shipping out 300 to 400 new companies every quarter, like there's nothing down here that will compare to that in terms of talent wars. Like, it's just like you knock on someone's door, they're like, I get paid $3 million a year. You're like, but leave and I'll pay you 100 and I'll give you 5% of my company. I mean, it just doesn't happen, right? So I think we do have talent wars that are more intense than they were before, but I still think we're still in a good place to operate. I think the remote piece has made it more interesting, and I'll touch upon that at the end. But I think first, when you're building your company, like decide what language you're going to build your company in. It sounds trivial because you'll probably just start in the language that you speak, but just make it a conscious decision, especially if you're starting outside of the US. I think we started Runa in Spanish, and then after our A, we switched to English. And the reason we switched to English was that I started to really reflect on bigger companies in the payroll space. So the largest payroll company of the world is ADP, and it's a 50,000 person company, right? Gusto, who's the more recent cohort that's made it to $1 billion company, is a 2,000 to 3,000 person company, right? And there I am with Runa at 50 people at closing my Series A. as I think about scaling the company, I don't want to have to just focus on talent that speaks Spanish. Why? Because there are very few public SaaS companies that are based in Latin America. Therefore, the people who are the experts in SaaS that have helped build the SaaS companies are probably not in Latin America. There may be some. I'm not kind of frowning on any SaaSes that exist. It's just stats, right? And so as a result, as I look for talent, I don't only want to preclude myself to Latin America. I want to make the world my stage and go after, if I'm looking for a chief revenue officer, I want to go after the best person for that, not necessarily just the best person that speaks Spanish, right? And so for us, it was a very conscious decision to say, for talent reasons, we're going to make Runa the base language for documentation, for communication. It doesn't mean people don't speak Spanish or Portuguese in our company, because we have people in Brazil as well. But it does mean that everyone from multiple countries can join Runa. And as a result, we have people in, I think, 20 different countries, with more recent additions in Pakistan and India since the global shift to remote work.
You're moving to international now, Courtney?
Well, we're moving. Well, we will have an international base of people, but we will never operate outside of Latin America. Like, we don't need to, and it's not going to be our strength, right? I don't want to go up against a local payroll software in France. Like, that's not my game, right? We have plenty of market to build an ADP-sized company of $80 billion just in Latin America. So I have my work cut out for me for one lifetime with that. But I think the hiring challenge is real, and I think you have to put yourself at the best advantage you can as a company. And for us, that was making the company in English and recruiting internationally. Doesn't mean we obviously first look to Mexico and Brazil and other places of Latin America for certain positions, but there's some that are just harder to find. And so we don't preclude Latin America, we include them in the pool, but there's also a huge percentage of people from all over the world.
Super. Thank you, Courtney. Gabriel?
And I think even though we did exactly the same thing here, like from the beginning, obviously because it was a global market that we were going after, but we always recruited everywhere and made English be the official language, even though like maybe 50% of the company is Brazilian. All the documentation, all the meetings, all the channels, like on Rocket Chat, you're discussing, like we say, it needs to be in English, because we don't want to limit the talent pool that we can like go for. So I think even for companies that want to start local, if they have, because of the talent pool now is global, they should try to make an effort to make English their first language. I think it helps on the long run in many ways. And you just ask about the culture, one last thing. Having a global, one thing that we do every year to try to create this kind of culture is to bring all the company together for 1 or 2 weeks and have some adventures together, do some bonding experiences, like having dinners and beers together. I think makes a big difference later on, and I would highly recommend it. Remote companies do this kind of thing.
Super.
One more comment there, if I can. Just on the culture piece and the remote piece. So as you think about English as your base language, like obviously if people can't communicate, they're going to have a hard time connecting. And so I think it is, if you decide to make your company sort of English first, I do think the company also needs to take on sort of training people in English as part of that initiative, right? And I think when we decided to make that shift, like we said, we'll train you in English and pay for language classes for our employees. And I think that's super helpful, because at the end of the day, anyone who can speak English basically has more opportunities for work, for increased pay. And there's a lot of studies across Latin America that say, 30% increase if you have fluent English. And so it's something that I think most people really want to learn and get better at, but they need some training wheels. So that also helps kind of your recruitment funnel. If you can find great talent that maybe have a rusty English and put them in some intense training programs.
Super. Great chat. Many thanks, both of you. I think Patrick is back.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Javier, for great moderation, and Courtney and Gabriel for great exchanging all of your insights. If you could leave the backstage and enter the hop-in application for a few Q&As. There's a ton of people here sending me messages, etc. So very exciting, and a lot of very great people on the stage. And thanks a lot for that segue too, Courtney and Gabriel. We're now going to talk more about culture, and obviously culture within the global regionalization strategies, which both speakers now spoke about. It's a deeper challenge.